Hey, it's Don, the Auction Professor. Today I'm going to shoot another BOLO out to you. This one here you're not going to find all the time, of course. It's vintage light bulbs, even going back to the Edison era with wood base and such forth. Now, I know it may sound crazy to actually look for these items, but occasionally you can be in an estate sale in an old Victorian house, and there may still be some actual vintage bulbs still screwed into the attic or in the garage or in boxes. Sometimes these show up actually in crates in the garage, still wrapped up in the original shredded material that they were packed and shipped in. So again, these do show up. I do find them even at closed down businesses that have been in business since 1890s. You got to look outside the box for these, but there's some that go for thousands of dollars. We've sold many, not a ton, but we do sell them occasionally. We get several a year that are worth hundreds of dollars. Then we get a handful of other ones. But again, the more BOLOs the more items you can look for, the more you're going to make. So anyway, we're going to go over the screen and we're going to show you some vintage light bulbs now. Okay, so now today is light bulbs. May sound crazy, just standard light bulbs. We're not going to try and mix too many Christmas or anything like that in there. I've covered some Christmas light bulbs, but light bulbs in general, people mix up a lot. They don't realize how old they are. They don't even check the dates. They just look, it's a light bulb, boom, it looks similar as any other one. I'm not going to mess with it. Now, I always look for the Edison ones, even in garages and things, because if you're at an old house or an estate sale, there's a chance that these show up. And I have found them before. They're not super huge. Even as an 1881 hand-blown Edison, it only went for $192. Literally, these were basically put together by hand even. I mean, it was just, before technology took over and they were doing them in mass, huge quantities. This was like borderline there, but a lot of them were hand-blown back in the day. So again, as you see, 192, it looks just like a normal light bulb. Most of the time, you will not see that paper label on them. You'll just think it's a light bulb. And again, look all over the place. These do show up. Estate sales is probably the best place, and then some auctions are secondary. Sometimes I'll find them in fixtures still, not necessarily this old, but some from the 1910-20s era. I'm going to show you some more in a different price range too. This is another hand-blown one. This is a typical Sputnik era one, 1950s, 60s, $199. Now there's 10 of these total, so people use these Christmas lights, but they were like night lights as well too, so it's not necessarily just Christmas light ones. And I'm probably going to show you another one. Now this really isn't actually a light, obviously. This is a Benjamin tri-way bulb adapter. So I just threw this one in here because there's some of these that are worth some money too. Most of these kind aren't worth much, but the Benjamin are. I'm not sure why that's the one that's always collected, but it's the only one I've ever sold are these Benjamin ones. And these show up too, and sometimes, again, you'll be in an old house, at an estate sale or an auction, and there'll just be a bunch of electronic junk thrown in, and one of these will be in there. The white parts are actually porcelain. On the top sections, it's brass, and then the bottom are porcelain. This one's porcelain, but sometimes you can find them actually in enameled steel as well, too. So just keep that in mind. $159 for something I usually pay $1 or $2 for. At the most, sometimes 50 cents or even a quarter. These show up right up here at Savers occasionally, too. Now, here's just a different version. It's literally basically almost the same. The extensions for the screw-ins are a little different, and this one, the brass, is terribly tarnished. I wouldn't call that a distracting factor. You can see they sold almost in the same price range regardless of the condition. So anyway, basically the same thing. Another Sputnik 150 on this one. Some of these weren't hand-blown, but for the most part, it's a regular bulb that they then dipped or had other attachments to it to make the fanciful Sputnik-looking thing on them. I've had some of these before. They do show up. You find them in Christmas sets mostly, but not always. Let's go to the next one. Now, these Aerolux bulbs, I've had some of these. I've even shown one or two in some of the halls. They light up. There's characters and figures in them. 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s were when you would find these. This one's probably 40s would be my guess, just by the looks of it. You can probably call it 30s, but most of these I see are 40s. Another Edison, again, they don't go for a super ton of money. This was a buy it now, so this person may have gotten more money out of it. I always liked the reflection these do on like the old vintage style shades. Like this one here, you can see the neat reflection on it. It's really a neat bulb, honestly. We've been to Edison's Menlo Park facility before. Henry Ford Museum has one of Edison's labs there as well too. They have a lot of recreation Edison bulbs. Edison made some of the equipment there also. So anyway, let's move on from that one. Another one, this is a Figural. It's a nude Art Deco woman, and they light up. This one still works. Most of these, believe it or not, weren't used very often when they were new, so they may only have a few, maybe a dozen hours, 20 hours, 50 hours on them. So most of these honestly do work. I've got plug-ins so I can test all kinds of bulbs here, and I've talked about that before. I've even shown you some, so I keep them around. If you ever run across like a bulb testers or just a socket with a wire for stuff, these oddball sizes, I always hang on to them because who knows what they're good for. Yeah, you could make a few bucks on them, but it's a future investment. I would take it. This is 200. Now this is a lot. These are unknowns too. Hairpin. Let me show you what a hairpin is, just so you can see. A hairpin is this one. It's just one single loop that literally looks like a hairpin or a hair clip from back in the day. They totally look different. The socket's pretty much the same. There's many different versions, and most people wouldn't realize how old some of these are. A lot of them are marked as well, too. This is just a solid spiraled, one-looped bulb, but look at the base. The bases are the same. There's usually a nub, though. If you see that nub on the right side, that's usually what I look for, or a nipple on the top. That is a nipple on the top. It's just the way they were blown, honestly. I don't think it says nipple, but that's what that is called. I assure you, I've sold some of those before. They're basically standardized, not all of them. Some of them, Edison only had Edison sockets, and if you don't have one of those, you can't test it. So I do have a couple versions of some of the Edison sockets, but they're few and far between. That's why I've kept them as I have. Now this has Morse code on the bottom. V for Victory, 1942-43 era, if I'm not mistaken. $91. These do show up. Sometimes you'll find them in the box, unused, totally mint. Sometimes I've seen case of them here or there. Very rarely, and I mean very rarely, but they do show up. Now here's a World War II airplane, DC-6, I would say, maybe. Yeah, it looks like a DC-6 to me. They were the mail plane as well at some point. And they're marked, as you see there on the bottom. Sometimes they're marked in actual embedded lettering, too, around the bottom of the socket side, on the brass section. That was 90. This one's 88. Now, again, it seems to vary on the condition on these. Now, if you can see, it's losing some. Now, that is actually lost from inside the bulb from it rattling around for the actual workings, mechanisms of it rubbing on the glass, from what I would say, because I do believe that's frosted in the inside. If not, either way, it's damaged. But I know some of these are frosted on the inside, so that way it wouldn't show the inner workings, and all you'd see is the figure. So condition plays a big part in some of these too. So anyway. Right day of the week too. I've seen them sell, one on one day of the week and another on another day from the same person, and they sold for, $50, $60 difference. There's only so many people that collect certain things. Now, this is a rose. I don't believe I think the light from the rose actually lights up the petals. So I don't think the petals were actually lit. Now, there's many different kinds of these, too. It might be that way. It's hard to say. I've seen most of these lit at sales or here and there, or have had them. There's dozens and dozens of these, even a Masonic one that goes for good money. That one's 80. Now, a lot of these you'll see, like they'll say base, one type of base. Mazda and Edison did some workings together starting in the 1890s through like 1950s even, because some of the Edison Mazda Christmas lamps you'll see. So just keep that in mind. And again, a lot of these work. The interesting one on these were made to be brighter. They had multiple filaments, as you see here. Lots of filaments lit up on it. Working, of course, is key. This one they actually didn't feel like taking apart the socket out of it, I would say, because these were made to be unscrewed too, as you can see. But I would have probably kept the socket. I guess they did take it off. I would have probably kept the socket personally, just in case I could test other ones in the future, if it's not a standard one. A lot of these are, though, but there's the little nub there on the base, just like you usually see, and I've talked about. Looks like a burn spot on the bulb, which does happen occasionally, too. But $77. Again, these are used light bulbs. Now here's the flower again in the box, so if you wonder what the box looks like, this is typical of them. Most of them look identical to this. And you can see the price. The other one went for like $80 without the box. So it's depending on the day of the week, too. You got to watch out, though, too, on some of these. This is probably a reproduction. Now, they remade some of these later on. You can find some newer ones even right now that are still being made on some of these. So $75 either way is a pretty darn good price on a light bulb. Someone probably just paid a couple bucks for it. Now this is another hairpin one. I don't think it says on here, but this is basically like a street light bulb. It's got a nipple on the top too. It's the hairpin, as you see, just one solid hairpin style wire. Nipple on the top again. It's in the box. That's probably similar to what these actually came in. There might have been two in here originally, but they were in big wooden boxes, and this does look like a street light. Very scarce. This one went for $2,250. Size and other factors here determine the value on it. Nipple helps on it if it has the nipple on the top, and also if it's a Edison base and Edison bulb. Again, because they did mix match those at some point. I don't know how you decide on that, but this is an early one. So some of the old postcards that you see that are real picture postcards actually show some of these bulbs. And I've had many that showed old street lighting, a bulb like this just hanging out in the middle of the street from one of the like streetcar wires. So anyway, another Edison brass-based beacon. Again, there's the beacon marking on it. It's probably an Edison. I can't say 100% because there's many of those. The paper labels fall off all the time if it's in a moist area, so just keep that in mind. You could run into this label, just this piece of paper with these dates on it, without any, mention of Edison or anything, and just that little paper label sometimes can go for $40 or $50. I've sold them, so I know. So anyway, and if it says Edison on the label, it's even more, because the bulb might be worth $200-300 on some of these, but the paper label never shows up. So when you find a label like that, it's worth some money. This one went for just over $300, that is. Here's another. This one says streetlight. That's basically what these are, and even in the photos you can see that. That's a rather interesting color. I don't think I've ever seen one quite colored like that. I don't know, maybe they're playing with the filter because it doesn't look green there. Let's just take a look. This one went for $264. Mazda tipped patent. Mogul base. Yeah, mogul base is something you'll hear too. Use an electric meter to read the wattage. Yeah, it does darken inside the bulb if you're reading along. He had to use goggles to photograph it. It was just so bright, I would imagine he was unable to get the camera to show it. But it does work. That's quite interesting. But anyway, $264. Another one here. Now this is an Edison. Again, paper label, and it's got one of his different factories in it, basically, or somebody who made it for him. Different style bases you do see. But again, this is an earlier one. Some of these were turned in differently. There's some that even have a wood base, believe it or not. I think I might have picked one out. $249.99, so $250 on that one. A couple more early Edison. Thomson-Houston. Now, this is another brand marking you'll see on some of these, too. Paper's damaged on these. As I said, most of the time the paper's gone, so it's got some corrosion. These probably will still light up. I don't test all of them, though, depending on the rarity and the fragileness of some of the battery or some of the light bulbs. These ones have some damage. Some of that white on there may affect it. You can see how it screws into the base of it as opposed to the base screwing onto it. That might be just a cover on there. It's hard to say. There's so many varieties. I don't know every variety. I know if it looks like this, I buy it. So again, just judge on the condition and what the bulb looks like. Even if they don't work, even if you can't prove they work. This one went for $197, and it does not say they work. Very partial labels in the glass, and both have been acid etched to frost the outside to cut down on glare. Yeah, that's typical. You can see stuff like that. So anyway, the top, as you see, is partially acid etched. They would have just dipped this into something and it would have etched it like that. So anyway, that could have been done even at the place that actually bought it to help disperse the light. I've seen that, honestly. Another street light. Again, it depends on the version, the model, how accurate it is, whether it works, and things along that line, onto the value of these. These are bright for the day because they lit up a street. 152. I don't think it says it works on this one. Yeah, no wobble. Sometimes they're loose inside there, so they just won't work because of that. But either way, it's a stamped, manufactured inside bulb. Yeah, so it's a rather interesting bulb, but either way. 152 on that one. Here's another one. This one's a wood base. Now, this is a copy. This is just a reproduction from 1929. You can find some of these from like the 33 World's Fair, and even before that. Now, they'd be reproductions. I've seen reproductions, modern-day ones. They still make some modern-day ones for factories and for, not necessarily factories, but for like historical places. Henry Ford Museum here has a bunch of them. They look identical to the originals, well-made, unique. This one has the blob on the top. This one's very unique. I don't think they lit this one, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it doesn't matter. These are different than a lot of the ones. You would wire it from the bottom there, and that's where you'd screw the wire in. This is the whole bulb. This is a one-piece thing right here. You wouldn't have taken this apart. It would have been built together like this, and as you see on the bottom, it's just the wires from inside the bulb running into here. Now, some of these were sealed with like wax or something, if I remember right, or some kind of like putty or something. I could be wrong in that, but I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. I read some stuff on these before when we first started finding, early light bulbs. I don't find a whole bunch of them. But again, you just need a couple of these to make some good money. So again, if you add a bunch of BOLOs, a bunch of items to look for, you're really going to increase your profits. Now here's another early style, and you can tell these are different than any modern day one, 1880s through 1890s. I believe this one's like 1900, almost on the dot, if I remember right. I've seen some of these. The red colored ones are unique because the glass is actually a ruby glass. It wasn't a huge, big, well-done process back then. To get glass of this color back then, they actually embedded gold in it. Gold makes a red-colored glass, if you didn't know that. So that's why some of these go for good money. I think this was a buy it now, and they just put it up for $99.95. And I would have put it up for probably twice that personally. Yeah, circa 1900. Patent date of 1880. That's just for the standardized bulb. Now this one's a red one, which would have been made later on from all I've seen in the past. So anyway, here's another one, Mazda light, blown squirrel cage. Now the squirrel cage you can see down in there around it. Well, it's kind of hard to show you. It's these things here are the squirrel cage. It's hard to say. It's just the filaments make like a cage style shape. So anyway, 129. I believe this was a buy it now too. So they might have done better. You can kind of see the cage on this one here, and it's just lights up all over the place. It's got tons of filaments in it. Before, they weren't efficient back then, so they did more to make more light. Nowadays, we just change one single filament and it can be bright. Or, obviously, LEDs just blow these all away. But the last one here is another light, Edison light, 179. This is probably like a street lamp. Probably not like a center street light that would have been hung in like an intersection, but just like a street lamp, something along that line. In this one here, you can see those screws on the left and on the far right. That's where you would have wired this, where the wiring, the electrical would have come out to wire it. Some of these are marked inside the bulb, believe it or not. And you can even see handwritten things to say the wattage on some of these. So, well marked. They're all marked. All of the ones I've ever seen were marked. So, anyway, that's just light bulbs for you. Hope that gives you an idea. Start you looking in garages and dirty places, old barns. Again, you will find some of these still in sockets, believe it or not, outside in old barns falling apart. Ones built in the 1890s, 1900s. They just cut off the electricity, in the 20s and never, even pulled a light bulb out. That, believe it or not, happens. Or fixtures that show up with, the entire fixture just yanked out of a house from the 20s. You may still find an 1890s light bulb in some of those. Not being used, of course, but anyway. That's what I have for you. Well, there you go. There's some more items that we look for. Again, they're not going to show up all the time, but it doesn't take much to earn a lot of money. You find a good one, you could make a couple $100. You find a better one, you can make thousands. But again, if you're not looking for them, you have no clue on vintage light bulbs, you're just not going to be finding them or turning them over. So anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and some thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when we post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.